In the cold dawn of a winter's morning, a royal daughter was born beneath the vaulted ceilings of a palace steeped in centuries of whispered secrets and iron traditions. Her arrival was greeted with fanfare and relief. After years of political unrest, a new heir promised stability, continuity, a future shaped in gold and power. Yet beneath the gilded cradle, shadows gathered. For this princess was born not only into privilege, but into a web of unyielding expectations, invisible shackles forged by blood and duty. From her earliest breath, the weight of her lineage pressed heavy on slender shoulders too young to bear it. The court smiled upon her innocence, but behind those smiles lurked calculating eyes, eyes that saw a vessel for dynastic survival, not a child with dreams. Her cradle rocked to lullabies woven from legacy and control, a fragile innocence, soon stained by the harsh reality of a destiny already written. As a girl, she wandered the palace halls, corridors echoing with solemn footsteps and muted whispers. The marble walls, cold and unyielding, mirrored the confines of her existence. Her laughter was rare, a fragile bloom amid a garden pruned by expectations. Tutors arrived with lessons in etiquette, duty, and history, but little was offered about freedom or selfhood. Every lesson was a thread in the tapestry that would bind her tightly to a role she had no choice but to accept. Her mother, the queen, was a figure both revered and feared. To the world, she embodied grace and strength, but behind closed doors, her love was measured in protocols and expectations. The queen's eyes held a mixture of hope and calculation, a legacy to secure, a lineage to protect. The princess was both heir and pawn, a fragile vessel to be shaped into a symbol of power. Even as her own desires faded into the background, the palace itself was a prison dressed as a sanctuary. Behind its opulent facades, the princess's world was tightly circumscribed. Walls that whispered stories of glory also muffled cries for mercy. The servants who moved silently in the shadows knew the rules but not the heartbeats behind them. Each day was a careful dance, where one misstep could unravel the delicate threads holding her world together. Outside the palace gates, the kingdom watched with bated breath. The princess was a symbol of hope to some, a tool of power to others, but none could see the quiet despair hidden beneath royal silk and jeweled crowns. Her lineage chained her to a destiny that would become both her crown and her cage. In these early years, innocence clashed with inevitability. She was a child with dreams, but those dreams were quietly extinguished, replaced by the cold logic of survival in a court where mercy was scarce and power demanded sacrifice. The gilded cradle rocked slowly into a future marked by shadowed halls and whispered cruelties. Yet even as the palace's cold grasp tightened, the flicker of life within her could not be fully snuffed out. A spark of humanity lingered, fragile and flickering, a reminder that beneath the weight of chains, a soul still struggled to breathe. And so the story begins. A princess born into chains, destined to live a life where power and cruelty entwined, where innocence would be consumed by the merciless demands of dynasty and desire. Her journey was not simply one of privilege, but one of profound imprisonment, a tale that would unravel into darkness far deeper than the court's glittering surface. The gilded cage was set, and the princess inside was unaware that her fate had already begun to twist toward tragedy. Her early years set the stage for a life defined by contrasts, hope and despair, love and cruelty, freedom and captivity. This was the paradox of a royal daughter born into chains, a living symbol of a family's glory and its darkest secrets, as she grew. So too did the invisible bonds that held her fast, tightening with each passing day. The crown she was destined to wear would come at a cost beyond mere title or power, a cost paid in pain, silence, and shattered innocence. Thus, beneath the palace's cold stones and golden spires, the first chapter of a tragic tale was written, in the delicate breaths of a princess, born into chains, whose life would be defined by the cruel dance between duty and destruction. The world outside remained oblivious to the silent suffering unfolding within, but those who watched closely could see the slow, inevitable unraveling begin. And from these earliest moments, the line between royalty and ruin was drawn, a line she would cross again and again as her fate twisted ever darker. Her story, buried deep within history's shadows, would one day echo as a haunting reminder of the price paid for power. The cold promise of birth, wrapped in gold but bound in chains, marked the beginning. But the palace doors, while grand, would soon close tightly, sealing a fate as dark as the stone corridors she called home. From this fragile beginning, the princess's life would unfold, a journey from hopeful heir to tragic captive, forever caught in the unforgiving grip of her bloodline. In the eyes of the kingdom, she was the living embodiment of hope. The royal daughter, once a fragile infant swaddled in silks, had grown into a young woman poised to inherit a throne heavy with history and expectation. The court lauded her as the promise of a new era of stability, prosperity, and continuity. But beneath the glittering veneer of public adoration, a far darker reality simmered. The very blood that bound her to the throne also tethered her to a web of ambition, betrayal, and cruelty spun by those closest to her. From the moment she was declared heir apparent, the princess found herself ensnared in the poisonous dance of court politics. Her parents, the reigning monarchs, projected an image of regal unity to the outside world, yet their relationship was a battleground of jealousy, fear, and control. The queen, revered and feared, viewed her daughter not only as successor but as rivaler, living reminder of her own fading power. Her eyes, once warm with maternal affection, grew cold and calculating, measuring the princess as both asset and threat. Her father, the king, was a man whose pride rivaled the weight of his crown. He saw in his daughter the fulfillment of his dynasty's future, but also the reflection of his own legacy's fragility. Beneath his public displays of strength lay a man haunted by failures, desperate to secure his line through whatever means necessary. To him, the princess was a vessel for his ambitions, a tool to be wielded in the relentless game of survival that defined royal life. Siblings, too, bore their own grudges and desires. Brothers, cousins, and distant relatives circled like vultures, each waiting for a moment of weakness, a crack in the princess's armor. Alliances formed and shattered with every whispered secret, every furtive glance. The court was a labyrinth of shifting loyalties, where love and hatred were often indistinguishable. Within this treacherous arena, the princess was both player and prize, expected to navigate the minefield with grace, even as it threatened to consume her. Publicly, she embodied the hope of the kingdom. Her appearances at ceremonies, adorned in jewels and silk, inspired the masses. Poets sang of her beauty and wisdom. Ambassadors praised her poise. To the outside world, she was untouchable, a shining beacon in uncertain times. But behind closed doors, the story was starkly different. The palace walls bore witness to whispered threats and icy silences, the corridors that echoed with adulation. During the day transformed at night into theatres of quiet cruelty. The princess's every move was scrutinized, her every word dissected. Trust was a luxury she could not afford. Even those sworn to protect her were bound by loyalty to bloodlines that valued power above all else. This tension between public glory and private torment marked her existence. She was the kingdom's future, yet her spirit was eroding beneath. The strain of expectations she could neither escape nor fully comprehend. The hopeful light that once sparkled in her eyes dimmed as the years passed. Replaced by a wary calculation born of necessity, her tutors and advisers, once nurturing, became instruments of control. Lessons extended beyond governance and diplomacy. To the brutal realities of survival in a hostile court, she learned to mask pain with smiles, to cloak fear in confidence. Every gesture, every expression was a performance designed to project strengthless weakness, invite ruin. The crown she was destined to inherit was a paradox, a symbol of ultimate authority and a mark of profound vulnerability. It demanded sacrifice, conformity, and above all, silence. Her desires, dreams, and fears were to be buried beneath layers of duty and decorum. Any deviation risked not only her position but her very life. Amidst this suffocating atmosphere, she found rare moments of solace in fleeting friendships and secret journals. These whispered escapes were fragile refuges in a world that demanded perfection, but even these were fragile, constantly threatened by the ever-watchful eyes of court spies and informants. This duality between public adulation and private despair cast a long shadow over her coming of age. The kingdom celebrated the princess as a symbol of renewal, but she bore within her the weight of an unspoken curse. The blood that secured her claim also carried a legacy of madness and ruin that had claimed many before her. Her story was not merely one of privilege, but of profound isolation. The very people who praised her were often the architects of her suffering. The royal family, bound by love, ambition, and fear, was also a crucible of cruelty. Each act of kindness was weighed against suspicion, every gesture a potential betrayal. The years wore on. The princess became more than a figurehead. She was a living battleground where hope and despair collided. Her growing awareness of the precariousness of her position fueled a cautious resilience, but also seeded a growing dread. The closer she came to the throne, the more the shadows lengthened. The public saw a poised, confident royal destined to rule, but behind the curtains, the cracks were beginning to show. Her laughter grew less frequent. Her eyes held a haunted quality. The pressure to embody perfection was crushing, and the cost was her innocence and peace of mind. The legacy she inherited was as much a burden as a blessing. The throne awaited, but so did the ghosts of dynastic failures, madness, betrayal, and death. The princess stood at a crossroads, caught between the shining promise of power and the dark inevitability of sacrifice. This chapter of her life ends not with triumph, but with the quiet gathering of storm clouds. The hopeful daughter crowned in public was already becoming a tragic figure, cursed by blood, symbol of the royal family's fragile and brutal reality, as the court prepared for the next stage of her life. Politically arranged marriage meant to secure alliances and strengthen the dynasty. The princess faced a new form of imprisonment. The gilded cage of public glory would soon be replaced by an even darker captivity. In the grand halls, where the echoes of whispered negotiations filled the air, the princess's fate was sealed not by love or choice, but by the cold calculus of power. The marriage pact was more than an alliance. It was a chain forged in duty and ambition, binding her body and spirit to the will of the crown. This union, celebrated in public with lavish ceremonies and painted smiles, concealed the grim reality of a woman sacrificed to the machinations of dynastic survival. From the moment the proposal was announced, the princess understood that her life was no longer her own. The suitor, a distant prince from a rival kingdom, was a stranger cloaked in political necessity. Their marriage was designed to cement fragile peace, to merge ambitions, and to reinforce the fragile threads holding two powerful houses together. Yet beneath the strategic veneer lay a chilling truth. She was a pawn, her personal desires erased, replaced by the demands of statecraft. The court buzzed with speculation, praising the union as a masterstroke of diplomacy. Nobles celebrated the promise of strengthened ties and expanded influence. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. The princess's own family harbored doubts and fears, uncertain if this alliance would truly secure their legacy or unravel it. To her, the marriage was a gilded cage, a trap that would lock her deeper into the labyrinth of control and expectation. The wedding day arrived with all the pomp and grandeur expected of royalty. Silk and gold adorned the halls, while musicians played melodies that masked the unspoken dread. The princess moved through the ceremony with practiced grace, her smile a fragile mask over the storm gathering within. Her new husband's eyes were cold and calculating, revealing little of the man behind the title, a man whose own ambitions mirrored the ruthless court that raised her. Behind closed doors, the reality of their union was starkly different from the public pageantry. The marriage was not a partnership of equals, but a hierarchy where the princess's will was secondary to her husband's desires and the demands of the court. Her body became a vessel for producing heirs, a tool in the endless pursuit of dynastic survival. The joy of youth was eclipsed by the relentless pressure to conceive and secure the bloodline. The palace that once felt like a prison now transformed into a harsher confinement. Each pregnancy was a cycle of physical torment and emotional isolation, her health deteriorating with every birth. Yet the court demanded appearances of strength and grace. To falter was to invite scandal, to risk the fragile alliances built on her compliance. The husband, distant and detached, was both a symbol of political power and a source of her deepest suffering. Their relationship was devoid of warmth, built instead on cold duty and unspoken resentments. His ambition left little room for tenderness, and the princess found herself trapped in a cycle of expectation and neglect. Whispers began to circulate within the palace, walls rumors of her weakening spirit, of silent tears shed in the privacy of her chambers. Yet the court responded with indifference or veiled contempt. In the ruthless game of power, empathy was a weakness the royal family could ill afford. The princess's suffering was a secret kept behind locked doors, hidden beneath layers of protocol and obligation. The marriage pact marked a turning point, a shift from hopeful heir to captive of circumstance. Her body was no longer her own, and her fate intertwined irrevocably with the relentless demands of royalty. The alliance, meant to secure peace, instead set the stage for a tragedy of endurance and loss. Yet even in this bleak reality, the princess's spirit flickered. Moments of quiet rebellion, surface letters penned in secrecy, stolen glances of defiance, the faint hope that within the crushing weight of duty, a shred of humanity might endure. These fragile acts of resistance, however small, were a testament to the resilience beneath her gilded chains. As the seasons passed, the cycle of pregnancy and recovery repeated with cruel regularity. The princess's body became a battlefield, scarred by the demands of a dynasty unwilling to relent. Each child born was a blessing to the realm, but a toll on the woman who carried them. Her health waned, and with it, the light in her eyes dimmed. The court, ever vigilant, masked its cruelty beneath ceremonies and official statements. Public appearances continued, the princess adorned in jewels and finery, a portrait of royal duty. Yet behind the painted smiles and poised gestures lay a woman unraveling, caught between her role and her reality. The marriage pact, once a symbol of hope for alliance and strength, revealed itself as a crucible of endurance. The princess's life became a relentless cycle of sacrifice, her identity consumed by the expectations imposed upon her. The gilded cage tightened, and the price of power became heartbreakingly clear in this chapter of her life. The contrast between public celebration and private despair deepened. The hopeful promise of marriage was shattered by the brutal truth of captivity, where love was absent and duty was a relentless taskmaster. As the princess's body and mind began to fray under the strain, the court's indifference grew colder. Her suffering was an inconvenient truth, buried beneath layers of silence and decorum. Yet the echoes of her pain would not remain hidden forever. The marriage pact, designed to secure a dynasty's future, instead became the dark axis around which her tragic fate revolved. And as the relentless cycle of pregnancy continued, the palace transformed into a prison where the princess's very existence was defined by endurance and loss. The palace walls, once gleaming with the promise of legacy and power, grew colder. With each passing month, as the princess found herself trapped in a relentless cycle that would come to define her existence. Pregnancy, her supposed power, was transformed into an unending torment. The very body that once symbolized hope now became a prison, shackled by duty and driven by a merciless decree. She must remain perpetually pregnant, a vessel for dynastic survival above all else. From the moment the marriage pact was sealed, the princess's body became the kingdom's battleground. The court's demand was clear: produce heirs children who would secure alliances, cement thrones, and strengthen bloodlines. There was no respite, no mercy, only the cold expectation that her womb would bear the future, regardless of the cost. With each pregnancy, the boundaries of her humanity blurred, replaced by a grim mechanical rhythm of conception, childbirth, and recovery, each cycle more devastating than the last. Medical care was rudimentary and often cruel by modern standards. The court's doctors, more concerned with results than well-being, administered treatments that were harsh and invasive, their ministrations underscored by an unspoken dismissal of her suffering. Rest was a luxury denied. The princess was expected to resume her public duties with the grace of a queen, even as her body was ravaged and exhausted. Her pain was an inconvenient truth, hidden behind the grandeur of court life. Physically, the toll was brutal. Morning sickness stretched endlessly. Swollen limbs and relentless fatigue became her constant companions. Childbirth, a ceremony of hope to the outside world, was for her an ordeal of agony and depletion. Each time, the womb that bore the kingdom's future threatened to break her entirely. Yet the cycle began. A new pregnancy imposed again, almost immediately, a cruel insistence on unbroken fertility. Psychologically, the strain was even more profound. The princess's identity, once more than a mere symbol, was gradually reduced to that of a living incubator. The joyful anticipation of motherhood was eclipsed by fear, dread, and despair. The palace, for all its beauty, transformed into a suffocating prison its gilded cages closing tighter with each passing day. Isolation deepened as she withdrew into herself, haunted by the endless recurrence of her fate. Her attendants, bound by protocol and fear, could offer little comfort. Their glances held pity that was quickly repressed. Sympathy was a dangerous luxury in a world ruled by appearances. The princess's cries, both literal and silent, were muffled beneath layers of etiquette and expectation. The court demanded. She embodied strength, yet refused her the very support that strength might require. Despite the agony, her pregnancies were public spectacles, carefully staged to affirm the dynasty's vitality. Every announcement was a political event, every birth a triumph lauded in verse and song. But the public only saw the crown and jewels, never the weary eyes behind the facade. The contrast between the princess's private suffering and her public role became a tragic paradox, her body both celebrated and sacrificed. As the years passed, the relentless pressure began to corrode her spirit. Moments of hope flickered briefly, when a child survived or when a rare smile touched her lips. But these were overshadowed by repeated losses and the creeping realization that her body might never recover. The palace corridors echoed not with laughter, but with the quiet, haunting rhythm of an endless cycle from which there was no escape. The psychological disintegration was subtle but unmistakable. The princess's mind, once sharp and curious, became a battlefield of despair and resignation. Hallucinations and nightmares crept into her waking hours, blurring the line between reality and torment. Her journals, hidden from prying eyes, revealed a soul slowly unraveling, caught between the desperate hope for freedom and the crushing weight of duty. Even her husband, distant and cold, was complicit in this cycle. His ambition demanded heirs, his presence a reminder of the power she was forced to wield unwillingly. The marriage had become less a partnership and more a chain, each pregnancy another link tightening around her will. His indifference deepened. Her isolation, his absence, a stark contrast to the burden she bore alone. The court's silence was deafening. Behind closed doors, whispered rumors questioned her strength, her virtue, even her sanity. Yet no one dared confront the true horror. A princess, a living symbol of hope, was being slowly destroyed in service to a legacy that demanded her erasure. The moral ambiguity of those who orchestrated her suffering was a shadow cast long across the royal family's history. This cruel cycle revealed the darkest truth of royal life. The body of the princess was not her own, but property of the crown. Her reproductive power, lauded as a gift, was weaponized as a form of imprisonment. The palace became a mausoleum of lost childhoods, broken bodies, and silenced voices. The price of dynasty was paid in blood and tears, etched into the fragile flesh of a woman trapped by duty. And yet, amid the despair, there were fleeting glimpses of defiance. Secret letters, furtive pleas for mercy, small acts of rebellion flickered like fragile flames in the dark. These quiet resistances, though ultimately crushed, revealed the enduring humanity beneath the princess's gilded chains. As the relentless years wore on, the palace's grandeur masked the growing devastation within. The princess's body weakened, her spirit frayed. Each pregnancy was another step toward an inevitable breaking point, a tragic countdown measured in lives carried and lost. This chapter of her life, defined by the horrifying paradox of power and imprisonment, set the stage for the psychological and physical collapse that would follow. The court's demand for heirs was a merciless sentence. one that would haunt her final days and echo through history as a testament to cruelty. Disguised as duty, as the seasons turned and the princess's condition worsened, the palace grew heavy, with secrets and shadows. The once vibrant corridors, filled with the murmur of courtly life, now whispered darker tales, rumors that spread like poison through the gilded halls. Whispers of frailty, madness, and silent suffering clung to the air, twisting the public image of the royal daughter into something far more sinister behind closed doors. The court was a place where appearances mattered above all, yet beneath the surface, fear and suspicion fermented. Courtiers spoke in hushed tones about the princess's prolonged pregnancies and her growing absence from public life. The rumors painted her as fragile, perhaps even broken. Some whispered that her mind was unraveling under the unbearable strain. Others suggested darker causes, curses, divine punishment, or even madness inherited from her ancestors. This eerie atmosphere deepened as attendants and servants, sworn to secrecy, traded quiet stories in the shadows. The princess, once a symbol of hope and strength, became an enigma wrapped in silence and sorrow. Her chambers, once places of refuge, were now perceived as prisons where her sanity slipped away unnoticed. Those closest to her bore witness to strange behaviors, sudden fits of despair, haunting silences, and ghostly shadows in her eyes. The psychological isolation was compounded by the political machinations playing out in the background. As the princess faded from the court's center stage, power struggles intensified. Ambitious nobles maneuvered to exploit her weakening position, while her own family grew increasingly distant, consumed by their own fears and agendas. The atmosphere was thick with mistrust. Alliances shifted with every whispered rumor. The queen, once the princess's closest kin, now regarded her with a chilling detachment. Her affection had been replaced by pragmatic coldness, a necessary cruelty to maintain the fragile stability of the throne. The queen's gaze, once warm, was now calculating and harsh, reflecting a family torn between love and survival. The princess's plight was a private agony overshadowed by public duty. The king, too, was burdened by the weight of legacy and expectation. His public facade of strength masked a growing despair, a man caught between the ruthless demands of monarchy and the helplessness of watching his daughter fade. His silence was a heavy shroud, a tacit acceptance of the grim reality unfolding within the palace walls. Amidst the growing whispers, paranoia took root. The princess's attendants feared retribution for revealing any weakness. Courtiers wondered who might rise from her fall. The palace itself seemed to close in, its walls absorbing the unspoken fears and dark suspicions. The echoes of footsteps in empty hallways became a haunting symphony of isolation. The princess's own mind wavered under this weight. She was caught in a liminal space between reality and nightmare, her thoughts fracturing under the relentless pressure. The whispers outside her door seeped inside, becoming internal voices that blurred truth and hallucination. Her identity, already eroded by endless pregnancies and captivity, threatened to dissolve entirely. The cold cruelty of court life left no room for compassion. Even those who once cared for her were forced to conceal their empathy beneath layers of protocol and fear. The emotional landscape became barren, marked by silence where cries for help went unheard. The princess's suffering was a secret too dangerous to acknowledge openly. Yet, despite the growing madness and isolation, faint flickers of resistance endured. The princess clung to memories of better days, to brief moments of clarity and hope. that pierced the gloom. These fragile sparks were both a lifeline and a source of torment, reminding her of what had been lost and what might never return. The whispers in the dark corridors served as a grim reflection of the princess's own fractured psychopalace, alive with secrets, yet deaf to its captive's pain. The duality of her existence deepened, a public figure shrouded in mystery, a woman unraveling in solitude. This contrast intensified the tragedy, exposing the hidden cruelty masked by regal splendor. As the court prepared to confront the consequences of her decline, the stage was set for a profound psychological unraveling. The princess's story was no longer just about duty or power, but about the fragile boundary between sanity and despair. The palace, once a throne of glory, had become a labyrinth of shadows from which she might never emerge. Beneath the polished veneer of royalty, the princess's mind began to fracture. The relentless weight of her duties, compounded by physical exhaustion and endless pregnancies, carved deep fissures into her psyche. What once was a sharp intellect and spirited will now blurred into a haunting landscape of despair and confusion, where reality intertwined with shadowed hallucinations and creeping madness. Her waking hours became battlegrounds, memories twisted and fragmented, blending past joys with present torments. Faces of loved ones shifted into specters. Whispered voices morphed into accusations. In the quiet solitude of her chambers, the line between truth and nightmare dissolved, leaving her grasping for a sense of self that slipped farther away with each passing day. Sleep offered no refuge. Nightmares wove vivid tapestries of loss and betrayal, replaying the endless cycle of childbirth and pain, the cold indifference of those meant to protect her. She awoke trembling, drenched in sweat, haunted by visions that clung to her mind's edges like ghosts refusing to be exorcised. These nocturnal terrors seeped into daylight, casting a pall over even the brightest moments. The court, aware of her deteriorating state, oscillated between discreet concern and strategic distancing. Physicians prescribed remedies, poultices, and treatments grounded more in superstition than science attempts to soothe a mind unraveling beyond their understanding. These interventions brought little relief. Often, they deepened her sense of isolation, reinforcing the cruel truth that no one truly saw the woman behind the crown. Her correspondence, once filled with diplomatic acuity, now revealed fragments of despair, cryptic letters, desperate pleas veiled in formal language, and fleeting moments of lucidity shattered by incoherence. Trusted confidants noted her shifting moods, lucid intelligence replaced by melancholy silence, bursts of anger and deep despondency. The princess was a prisoner within her own mind, trapped by forces both internal and external. The palace itself seemed to echo her mental disintegration. The cold stone walls, the endless corridors, the flickering candlelight all became symbols of her entrapment. Shadows lengthened, and silence deepened, mirroring the void growing within her. The contrast between the dazzling throne she was destined to claim and the crumbling fortress of her mind was stark and heartbreaking. Her family's response was marked by a chilling ambivalence. Publicly, they maintained the facade of care and decorum. Yet behind closed doors, many viewed her decline as a liability, a weakness, threatening the stability of the dynasty. This moral ambiguity underscored the loneliness that engulfed the princess. The love she might have expected was tempered by fear, political calculation, and survival. In rare moments of clarity, she clung fiercely to her fading identity. These were the fragments of self that refused to be swallowed by madness, the memories of childhood innocence, the whispered hopes of a life beyond duty, the faint stirrings of rebellion. But such moments were fleeting, slipping through her fingers like grains of sand. Hallucinations became increasingly vivid. She saw figures long gone, heard voices that no one else could perceive. Sometimes she believed the walls themselves whispered secrets. Other times, the shadows seemed to reach out to her, beckoning with promises of release or doom. These visions were at once terrifying and comforting, an escape from a reality too harsh to bear. Her psychological disintegration was not merely a private tragedy, but a reflection of a system that demanded perfection while punishing vulnerability. The relentless pressures of royalty duty, image, production of heir sued, the very essence of her being. In this crucible, madness was not aberration but consequence. Amid the darkness, subtle signs of resistance flickered. Through coded letters and hidden messages, the princess reached out beyond her prison, seeking connection, understanding, perhaps even salvation. These desperate acts underscored the complexity of her suffering, not just madness, but a profound cry for agency and recognition. Her story during this period is one of tragic duality, the public face of regal dignity masking a private world, unraveling into chaos. This contrast magnified the horror of her descent, turning her once radiant promise into a haunting, cautionary tale of power's cost. As her mind teetered on the edge, the court prepared for the consequences. The delicate balance between control and compassion was irrevocably broken. The fragile mind beneath the crown was unraveling, and with it, the last hope for redemption. In the gilded halls where whispers once concealed secrets, indifference now reigned supreme. The princess's decline was no longer a mystery but a burden, one the court chose to bear with cold calculation rather than compassion. The very people sworn to protect her became architects of neglect, their priorities tangled in ambition, fear, and ruthless self-preservation. As her health faltered and her mind frayed, the royal family maintained a facade of concern, outwardly performing the rituals of care and duty. Yet beneath these ceremonies lurked a chilling apathy. The queen's gaze, once a mixture of hope and calculation, had hardened into detachment. Her love was measured not in tenderness, but in political expediency. The princess was no longer a daughter but a liability, a threat to the dynasty's fragile stability. The king's silence spoke volumes. Behind his stoic mask lay a man crippled by helplessness and pride. His failure to intervene was a tacit consent to the suffering endured by his child. In the ruthless calculus of monarchy, personal anguish was often sacrificed on the altar of legacy. His inaction echoed through the palace like a dirge, a mournful acceptance of a grim fate. Courtiers, nobles, and advisers circled with practiced disinterest. They calculated their moves, balancing allegiances and ambitions, often viewing the princess's condition as an opportunity. Her weakening presence created power vacuums, spurring covert contests for influence and favor. Compassion was a currency too costly to spend. Survival demanded cold pragmatism. The medical attendants who tended to her were no strangers to cruelty masked as care. Treatments were harsh, sometimes punitive, reflecting a worldview that equated weakness with failure. Their ministrations, dictated more by protocol than empathy, inflicted pain alongside healing. The princess's suffering was compartmentalized only insofar as it served political necessity. Within this atmosphere, genuine empathy was dangerously rare. Those who dared to show kindness risked suspicion, ostracism, or worse. The court's culture of silence smothered cries for mercy, replacing them with ritualized performances of strength and resilience. The princess's pain was a taboo subject, discussed only in coded whispers or denied altogether. This moral ambiguity permeated every level of court life. Love and cruelty intertwined in a tangled web of duty and fear. Family members, bound by blood yet divided by ambition, navigated a labyrinth where vulnerability invited ruin. The princess's suffering became a mirror reflecting the fractured soul of the monarchy itself. Publicly, the court upheld the image of a strong, united royal family. Official statements praised the princess's courage and fortitude, framing her struggles as noble sacrifices for the greater good. These narratives masked the harsh truths hidden behind palace walls, truths of neglect, exploitation, and profound isolation. The princess, isolated within her chambers, became a ghost among the living. Her once bright presence faded into the background, an inconvenient reality overshadowed by the court's need to maintain appearances. The contrast between her visible fragility and the court's ruthless indifference created a tragic tableau, one where suffering was invisible too. All but a few, her attendants, caught between duty and compassion, bore silent witness to the cruelty. They navigated a perilous path, balancing loyalty with empathy, often forced to suppress their own anguish. Their whispered confidences painted a portrait of a woman, slowly being erased by the very system meant to uphold her in this cold crucible. The princess's humanity was chipped away, layer by layer. The relentless pressure to conform, to endure, to silence her pain, crushed the fragile spirit beneath. The court's cruelty was not always overt. Often it was the absence of care, the refusal to acknowledge suffering, that inflicted the deepest wounds. Yet amid this bleak landscape, the princess's endurance became a testament to resilience. Her silent suffering, though ignored by many, spoke volumes about the cost of power and the sacrifices demanded by dynastic ambition. The court's indifference illuminated the dark heart of monarchy where mercy was scarce and survival paramount, as the princess's body and mind continued to deteriorate. The court's cold calculus showed no signs of softening. Her fate was sealed not by overt cruelty alone, but by a systemic apathy that tolerated suffering in pursuit of greater goals. This moral vacuum shaped the final stages of her tragic journey. The final days of the princess's life unfolded in a solitude so profound it seemed the palace itself held its breath. Behind the heavy oak doors of her chamber, far from the dazzling crowds and whispered court gossip, she lay broken, a fragile figure trapped between the relentless demands of duty and the quiet surrender of exhaustion. The grandeur that once surrounded her had faded into cold shadows, and the silence within those walls was as deafening as the cheers she no longer heard. Her body, ravaged by years of ceaseless pregnancies and unyielding expectations, was a testament to endurance beyond human limits. The toll of bearing life repeatedly, each time at the cost of her own vitality, had left her weakened to the brink. Pale skin stretched tight over fragile bones, eyes sunken but still holding flickers of the woman she had once been. This was no longer a princess adorned with jewels. This was a prisoner of a legacy that demanded sacrifice without reprieve. The chamber itself, once a sanctuary, had become a mausoleum. Thick tapestries dulled the light, muffling sounds and isolating her from the world outside. Attendants moved silently in and out, faces set with practiced calm, masking the despair they dared not express. The air was heavy with unspoken grief, the scent of incense mingling with the faint trace of illness and decay. despite the layers of care. Medics attending her with a mixture of professional detachment and furtive sorrow. Nothing could stem the slow unraveling. The princess's breaths grew shallow, her strength ebbing like the fading light at dusk. Her mind drifted between moments of lucidity and deep fog, where memories mingled with dreams, and the boundary between past and present blurred. She clung to fragments of hope, fleeting images of freedom and love, but they slipped through her fingers like smoke. The cruel irony of her existence pressed down with crushing weight. The very lineage she upheld had become the instrument of her destruction. Her life was a paradox, a public symbol of vitality and continuity, private testament to exhaustion and loss. Outside her chamber, the court continued its routines, oblivious or indifferent to the final struggle playing out within. The vibrant halls echoed with the preparations for grand ceremonies and political maneuvers, masking the intimate tragedy unfolding in silence. To the world, the princess remained an emblem of strength, even as her light dimmed beyond recognition. The queen, despite her public facade of composure, was caught in a storm of conflicting emotions. Behind the veil of duty, she grappled with guilt, fear, and resignation. Her love for her daughter was shackled by the harsh realities of power, an agonizing blend of maternal affection and political necessity. She watched helplessly as the princess slipped away, the crushing cost of ambition etched into every frail breath. The king's grief was quieter, buried beneath layers of stoicism. His pride forbade open displays of weakness, yet those close enough glimpsed a man shattered by loss. The crown he had so fiercely guarded now felt heavier, tainted by the price it demanded. His daughter's death was not just a personal tragedy, but a wound that cut deep into the heart of the dynasty. In the final hours, the princess's consciousness flickered like a dying flame. She whispered names, echoes of love and memory before slipping into silence. The attendants stood vigil, their faces etched with sorrow and helplessness. The palace, for all its grandeur, felt emptier than ever, the silence after her last breath a haunting echo of a life stolen by duty. Her death was both an end and a beginning, a somber punctuation mark on a story of sacrifice and sorrow. It was a stark contrast to the public spectacle that had marked her life. A private moment of loss hidden beneath layers of ceremony and protocol. The kingdom mourned a princess who had been both a beacon and a captive. Her legacy etched in both glory and tragedy. The chamber where she died would become a silent testamenta, reminder of the cost of power and the fragile humanity beneath royal splendor. Her story, buried in shadow for so long, would echo through history as a haunting lesson in cruelty, endurance, and the tragic price of dynasty. As the court prepared to move forward, seeking to bury grief beneath political ambition, the princess's silent chamber stood as a stark symbol of a life consumed by forces beyond her controller. Chilling reminder that beneath the crown lay a woman broken by the very legacy she was meant to uphold. The death of the princess sent ripples through the kingdom, but the palace's response was swift and calculated. To the outside world, her passing was mourned with solemn ceremonies and grand proclamations, framed as the ultimate sacrifice for the dynasty's survival. Yet beneath the pomp and protocol lay a deliberate effort to erase her story from the official record, to bury the painful truths that threatened the royal family's carefully curated image. The immediate political fallout was tense and fragile. Allies watched closely, and rivals seized on any perceived weakness. The princess's demise was both a tragedy and an opportunity, a stark reminder of the human cost of power. but also a moment to reinforce the narrative of strength and continuity. The court moved quickly to install a new heir and redirect public attention away from the haunting questions surrounding her life and death. Within palace walls, silence fell heavy. The princess's chambers were sealed, her personal effects hidden or destroyed. As if by erasing the physical remnants of her existence, her memory might also vanish. Portraits that once captured her youthful promise were removed from galleries, replaced with images of successors deemed more palatable to the court's narrative of triumph. Her name, once spoken with reverence, was reduced to whispers among the lowest ranks, fading into obscurity. This systematic erasure was more than mere political expediency. It was a cultural amnesia that distorted history itself. The princess's story became a cautionary tale, twisted and sanitized to serve the interests of those in power. Her suffering was reframed as noble sacrifice, her resilience praised. But the cruelty that defined her final years was glossed over or ignored entirely. Yet, even as official histories dismissed her, the psychological scars she bore that echoed through the dynasty could not be so easily buried. Family members carried the weight of her memory in private grief and unspoken guilt. The relentless pressures that had destroyed her would persist, shaping the lives and expectations of future generations. Her tragedy was not an isolated incident, but a symptom of a system that demanded perfection at any cost. Among courtiers and servants, hushed conversations preserved fragments of her true story. These oral histories, passed down quietly, revealed a woman caught between duty and despair, a victim of relentless cruelty masked by regal splendor. Such memories, though unofficial and suppressed, kept alive the human dimension of a princess too long reduced to a symbol. The contrast between the public image of glory and the hidden reality of horror invites reflection on the nature of power and memory. The dynasty's need for a flawless narrative obscured the complex truths of suffering and sacrifice. This dissonance between appearance and reality underscores a recurring theme in royal histories: the silencing of inconvenient truths to uphold authority. Historians who later pieced together the princess's life faced daunting challenges. Fragmented records, coded letters, and the deliberate destruction of evidence complicated efforts to understand her fully. Yet these very challenges underscore the profound discomfort her story causes, unsettling reminder that history is often written by those who seek to control its narrative. Her legacy is thus a haunting, a shadow cast over the lineage she was born to protect. It is a story of endurance, loss, and the erasure of suffering that speaks to broader questions about how societies remember and forget. The princess's life and death compel us to question whose stories are told and whose are silenced. In the end, the princess's forgotten legacy is a testament to the costs of power, personal, psychological, and political. It challenges us to look beyond the polished surfaces of history and confront the complex, often painful realities beneath. Her story remains a powerful, if hidden, chapter in the tapestry of royal tragedy. The final section will explore the enduring question of beauty and cruelty. Intertwined, how a life marked by suffering can leave a legacy both haunting and profoundly human. The princess's story, though rooted in a distant past, reverberates far beyond her own time, casting long shadows over the tapestry of royal history. Her tragic fate is not an isolated chapter, but part of a haunting pattern, a cycle of cruelty, sacrifice, and silenced suffering woven deeply into the fabric of monarchy. The crown, gleaming with power and prestige, often conceals a darker truth. the human cost borne especially by royal women whose lives are shaped less by choice than by obligation. Throughout history, the throne has been both a seat of glory and a prison of expectation. For countless princesses, queens, and consorts, the demands of producing heirs, maintaining appearances, and embodying ideals of purity and strength have exacted a brutal toll. The princess's life stands as a stark exemplar of this oppressive legacy, her body a battleground, her mind a fragile fortress besieged by forces beyond her control. The recurring cycle of dynastic tragedy emerges as a cruel paradox. Each generation inherits not only a crown but the burdens of those who came before. Pressures intensified by political machinations and societal expectations. The princess's story is echoed in whispered histories of others who suffered in silence, their lives marked by endurance and erasure. These tales reveal a systemic pattern of female oppression disguised as duty and loyalty. Yet within this darkness, the princess's narrative also offers profound insight into resilience and humanity, her quiet acts of resistance, letters penned in secret, moments of defiance illuminate a spirit that refused to be wholly extinguished. Even as she was trapped in a gilded cage of obligation, the flicker of her agency shines through the shadows, reminding us that beneath the weight of history lie individuals with complex desires and vulnerabilities. The haunting legacy she leaves challenges modern audiences to grapple with the complexities of power and memory. It calls into question the narratives we inherit and the histories we choose to tell or silence. Her story forces a reckoning with the ways in which institutions, often built on ideals of honor and legacy, can perpetuate cycles of suffering, particularly for women. Artists and historians alike have sought to reclaim the voices of those lost to time, peeling back layers of myth to reveal the human truths beneath. The princess's life has inspired countless works, from somber portraits to evocative literature that explore the intersections of beauty, cruelty, and power. Through these lenses, her legacy endures as a poignant meditation on the price of dynasty and the resilience of the human spirit. The symbolism of the haunted throne endures a powerful reminder that behind every crown lies a story, often untold, of sacrifice and survival. The palace walls that once confined her continue to echo with the silent screams and whispered hopes of those who came before and after. The princess's life becomes a mirror reflecting ongoing struggles with authority, identity, and agency that transcend time. In contemplating her story, we confront uncomfortable truths about the nature of history itself. The dazzling pageantry and celebrated legacies often overshadowed the hidden cruelties and personal tragedies that shaped them. The princess's experience challenges us to look deeper, to question glorified narratives, and to honor the complex humanity at their core. Ultimately, her tale serves as a somber warning and a call for empathy. It urges us to recognize the human cost behind symbols of power and to listen for the voices long silenced by history's weight. The princess, once confined by duty and despair, now speaks across centuries, her echoes reminding us that legacy is never just about grandeur, but also about the lives it shapes and scars. As this story fades into the annals of time, its lessons remain vivid, that power without compassion breeds tragedy, that silence conceals suffering, and that the haunted throne is a place where beauty and cruelty are forever entwined. The princess's life and death are a testament to these enduring truths, sun indelible mark on history.